Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We are here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel here so you catch these live episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast feed so you get all of those podcasts on Mondays and Fridays, downloaded straight to your phone via Spotify or wherever you do listen to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. And also, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, where you can find all of my written work via KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. You can also obviously find the podcast, the YouTube show, all that good stuff lives on my Twitter at BRamseyKSR. But thank you all for tuning in today to our episode of All Fired Up. We are going to be diving into some of the results from last night, Tuesday night. We will also be previewing a little bit of the Wednesday night slate as well. So, as folks start to trickle in here, obviously, part of the reason we host this show live here on Wednesdays is to interact with the listeners. So, please, if you have a question about anything that's happening in the college basketball universe, if you have a gambling question or anything like that, a question about a game tonight or a result last night, even looking ahead to the weekend, anything, please leave that in the chat and I will make sure at some point during the show to answer your question. Let me make sure I've gotten the link tweeted out here. There we go. So, yeah, we are live here with All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Obviously, the biggest news, and we'll dive into this a little bit more as we get to it. But just as we were going live here, Coach Chris Holtmann and Ohio State have officially parted ways. So we have our first major college basketball opening as the carousel starts to go around. You know, a lot of people probably would have thought that would be Louisville. That's for all intents and purposes open, but Kenny Payne is still there. Um, Even just about an hour ago, just before the Chris Holtmann news broke, the Michigan or the AD at Michigan had a statement about Juwan Howard, essentially saying that they had not thought about firing him, which seems odd. But those are obviously some other jobs that will likely come open or potentially will come open. But either way, we now have an opening, and that is in Columbus, Ohio, as the Buckeyes and Chris Holtmann have parted ways. But let's get into today's topics. And I don't think there's anywhere to start other than by talking about North Carolina's loss last night to the Syracuse Orange. Obviously, we all know um, with the parity in college basketball this year, uh, it's not unique for a top 10 team to lose on the road to an unranked opponent. We all know those stats. But North Carolina now has lost 3 of their last 5 games. It is not going well right now for the Tar Heels. And it's funny. And it seems like this is just where college basketball is this season, that as soon as you think a team has it all figured out, they go on a stretch like this. Pretty much unless you're Connecticut, Purdue, to some extent Houston, and then one other team actually that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Pretty much every team in college basketball has had kind of a stretch like this. And like I said, it does always seem to come on the back of your best run of the season. Like North Carolina starts off ACC play 9-0. They were in that conversation. They had kind of put themselves up there with Connecticut and Purdue as, all right, here is the cream of the crop in college basketball. Heck, I think we talked about that on this show just a couple of weeks ago about how the Tar Heels were that caliber of team because they were playing at such a high level defensively. Then you add in obviously Armando Bacot, but then RJ Davis playing like one of the best guards in all of college basketball. But then they go on the road and lose to Syracuse. And as I said, that's their third loss in 5 games. They're now 11-3 in ACC play. They've certainly let Duke back into that race at the top. Virginia had a great chance to put themselves in position to win the league, but then they lose at home to Pittsburgh last night. So that kind of put them back down a rung. But North Carolina is still, they're a high level team. as I always say this year, like I think more than anything, we just can't overreact to these things. Like you can't say, well, we were wrong about North Carolina. Look, they've lost 3 out of 5. Well, again, I guess if you want to have the opinion that it's just a Connecticut and Purdue collision course, and those are the only two teams that are worth a darn in college basketball this season, then fine. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's at least a conversation I think we can have. But I don't think the Tar Heels stink. I don't think they're a bad team. I don't think that they've been exposed. I mean, look at what Syracuse did last night. They shot 63%, I think it was, from the field, and it was like their best shooting performance literally since 2011, I believe I saw. So again, I mean, it's a situation where, okay, in order to beat North Carolina, you have to be playing at home, and you have to have your best shooting performance since 2011. Now, I don't think that makes Tar Heels fans feel any better today, but from a national perspective, that's why I'm not panicking about them. I still think that they will end up winning the ACC. I still think this is a potential Final Four team on the short list of teams that could probably cut down the nets and win the national championship. Yeah, this has not been a very good stretch. Yeah, I mean, the home loss to Clemson in a lot of ways is even worse than their losses to on the road at Georgia Tech and Syracuse, but I still think they're good. And when Judah Mintz and JJ Starling go for 25 and 23 points, I believe, respectively, in that game for the Orange, those guys each played 40 minutes. Well, Judah Mintz and JJ Starling are talented enough to have games like that where they beat anybody in the country. Now, some of their inconsistencies are why Syracuse is 7-7, I believe, in league play. Yeah, 7-7 in the ACC. But they're absolutely talented enough to combine for 48 points and go win a basketball game against a top 10 team. And we saw that last night. So North Carolina, just the most recent in the list of teams to go down against unranked opponents on the road. A top 10 team that did not lose on the road last night was Coach Shaka Smart and Marquette. This team is playing at as high of a level as anybody in college basketball. To me, as North Carolina has kind of removed themselves from that group that's knocking on the door with UConn and Purdue, Marquette's quietly putting themselves in that conversation after a little bit of a shaky start to the season. Here they are. They've won 8 straight games, including 5 of those coming on the road in Big East play last night, defeating the Butler Bulldogs at Hinkle Fieldhouse 78-72. Tyler Kolek is playing at the level that we've expected out of him all season. You know, everybody was as high as possible in Marquette. They're ranked number 4 now. It's essentially where they were in the preseason. It just took a little bit of a while to get back to where they are. But Tyler Kolek is now averaging, during this 8-game winning streak, he's averaging 20.6 points and 9.4 assists per game. That is the All-American Tyler Kolek that we all expected this season, and we are getting it during this 8-game winning streak. I love what they can do defensively. Their offense is starting to look the part that we all expected, with obviously Kolek, but with Cam Jones, Osei Ighodaro. All those guys are playing at the level. David Joplin. This group is a veteran team. They're the perfect example of a team that you weren't going to overreact to early in the season. You kind of figured they were going to get it all figured out, and here they are now 19-5, 10-3 in Big East play, with a trip to the defending national champion UConn Huskies on Saturday. That's just going to be, you know, an out of this world type of game to watch on Saturday. And Marquette has some work to do. They're 2 games behind the Huskies, obviously winning, and they have 2 more games with them. So in theory, they can get themselves back there, honestly, by just controlling their own destiny. But beyond that, that's going to be a wake-up call to college basketball if they can go on the road to Storrs, Connecticut, and win that game on Saturday. Quickly, before we get too far removed, Travis Shoemaker in the chat says UNC is 1 guard away from a title contender, and he says that guard could be Caleb Love. Well, I think there's some truth to that. I don't know, you know, if you're a North Carolina fan, I don't know if you want it to be Caleb Love. He's a guy that can win you any game. He's also a guy that can probably shoot you out of just about any game. You can probably ask Arizona fans about that this season. But yeah, I mean, RJ Davis is as good as anybody in the country. but they don't have a whole lot of help around him in that backcourt, especially with Cormac Ryan not necessarily shooting it at the level that they've expected him to shoot the Notre Dame transfer this season. But yeah, they probably do need a little bit of help with RJ Davis in that backcourt. Um, I guess we're now on the theme of ranked teams that did not lose on the road after talking about UNC. The next one here would be Iowa State, the Cyclones, Coach TJ Otzelberger. This team is one of the more interesting teams, in my opinion, in college basketball. They go on the road last night to Cincinnati, win 68-59. Obviously, we know their defense is elite, top 5 in the country. They're right now 3rd in Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency. Some questions on the offensive end. Last night, again, only scored 68 points. They're 45th in offense. Everybody likes to cite the top 20 Ken Palm thing when it happens on the defensive end. But for some reason, teams that aren't as good offensively seem to get a pass. And I think that you have to wonder if this Iowa State team is good enough to make a deep March run with that level of offense. But their defense is so elite. They're forcing turnovers on 26.3% of opponents' possessions. That's number 1 in the country. They are getting steals, so live ball turnovers, excuse me, on 15.7% of opponent possessions. That is just out of this world, and that helps a otherwise maybe a little bit struggling offense. It helps it be better when you can force turnovers and maybe get some easy baskets. That's what the Cyclones can do. They've now won 3 straight over Texas, TCU, and Cincinnati. 2 of those coming on the road, and that's where I want what I want to talk about with this Cyclones team. A couple of weeks ago, it's probably been a month or so ago now. On my podcast, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, talked about, I think at the time it was like 19 teams or so that I thought at the time were kind of the best, and the teams that at the time I would have been willing to say, I'll take these teams. You can have the field to win the national championship. I know that's a big number, but I thought this year that basket was much higher than in previous years because of the level of parity. Some of these losses that we've seen, nobody really having an elite resume. Well, the teams that I talked about at the very top with sort of the clean resumes, which I labeled as not having a home loss and then not having a quote unquote bad like mid-major type of loss. Obviously, UConn and Purdue are like that. Houston is like that to some extent as well, though they did lose back-to-back in league play. I don't know if you want to count that as not. To me, at this point, you probably don't because the Big 12 is just so darn good. But Iowa State was the outlier that I didn't really mention that fit all of the criteria. Yes, looking back on it, their back-to-back losses on a neutral court to Virginia Tech and Texas A&M, that's not great. That's why I didn't feel like I needed to include them in the conversation at the time, because neither Virginia Tech or Texas A&M have had all that good of seasons. But since then, their only losses are at Oklahoma, at BYU, and at Baylor in league play. They've now gone on the road in the Big 12 3 times and won. That's not something that's happening a lot around college basketball. So that their resume is pretty clean when you look at they haven't lost at home and they don't have a mid-major or truly bad loss. I mean, their worst loss is to Ken Palm number 61, Virginia Tech on a neutral floor. That's not all that bad. Like when you look around college basketball, this is as good of a resume as there is, and I think that they deserve to be mentioned among these really, really high-level teams right now with what they're doing this season out in Ames, Iowa. Tamin Lipsey is a big part of that as well. Their sophomore point guard, has been outstanding for them, and he was a big part of it last night as well at Cincinnati, scoring 15 points, dishing out 4 assists. He's been excellent. A few of the other results worth talking about last night. We were just mentioning Texas A&M. To that point, they lose at the buzzer in Nashville last night. Vanderbilt takes them down. Ezra Manjon puts one into the buzzer. Travel, not travel. It was a little shaky. Honestly, I mean, I talked about it a lot. I didn't think Vanderbilt. I thought there was a real chance Vanderbilt wouldn't win an SEC game this year. Now it looks like that crown might go to Missouri, but credit to Vanderbilt. They've gotten 2 wins now, and I've always liked Coach Jerry Stackhouse. I mean, their team last year was really, really good. Um, Year 4, he had just continued building and gotten them to almost an NCAA tournament team last year. This year's just a lost season. They, for some reason, they had their best year ever, or not ever, but their best year in recent memory. And then everybody leaves. That was kind of weird. So I don't know what's going on kind of inside the walls there at Memorial Gymnasium in Nashville. But credit to Vandy. Credit to Coach Jerry Stackhouse last night for getting that win over Texas A&M. Big hit to their resume. New Mexico goes on the road and wins at Nevada in a big-time Mountain West matchup. No rest for the weary, though, as New Mexico now has to go on the road Friday and play at San Diego State. So the hits just keep coming in the Mountain West, but that battle at the top continues to be off the charts. Really impressive performance for Coach Richard Pitino's squad last night. They're so balanced offensively. Jamal Mashburn in that game has 17 points. Nelly Jr. Joseph has 11 points, 13 rebounds in that game. Donovan Dent, 7 assists. They can just hurt you in so many ways. I think their backcourt still, I think they are the best team in the Mountain West. And I'm telling you, this is a team that can really, really make some noise in the NCAA tournament. Again, circle that matchup for them, the Lobos at San Diego State on Friday night. Got to talk about Terrence Shannon Jr. for a minute. 31 points last night against Michigan. I think he had 28 in their previous game. Obviously, that was a loss to Nebraska, but still back-to-back 28, 31-point games. Before the allegations against him that sat him out for a handful of games, he was playing like a first-team All-American. Probably because of everything that's happened, he's not going to be an All-American this season, and I can understand that. But he is back to playing like a first-team All-American. Illinois beat the doors off of Michigan last night, 97-68. Obviously, off the top, we mentioned Chris Holtmann being out as the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. In the chat here, Eddie Conger says Chris Holtmann to Kentucky as associate head coach would be a great hire. Yes, it would. If you could get that, and I know he's from Kentucky. Kentucky fans know that well. That's why we used to talk about him being the new head coach. But when Coach Cal retires or gets run out of town or whatever, but obviously now that it ended up not even going well there at the end in Columbus. But just wanted to quickly mention the names that this is from Trilly Donovan on Twitter. He's normally pretty good. And there's probably no sourcing really to have had here, but throws out Greg McDermott, Sean Miller, Nate Oates, Lamont Paris, Dusty May, Mick Cronin, Porter Moser. Somebody else had asked me about Sean Miller. Oh, yeah, Sean Miller's on the list. So obviously, this is going to be one of the most sought after jobs in the country this year, even regardless of what other jobs come open. Ohio State's going to be one of the best ones. They've really good NIL set up. Booster money is through the roof. Basketball is a really big deal in the state of Ohio. Buckeyes are going to get a good hire. Who that is, way too soon to tell. So job's only been open for about an hour. But no, I don't think Chris Holtmann, to answer Eddie's question in the chat, no, I don't think Chris Holtmann will end up being the associate head coach at Kentucky. He'll be to me, it's either he gets a head coaching job immediately for somebody else that fires a coach, or you do TV for a year and then you get a head coaching job. I can't imagine somebody of his caliber taking an assistant job really anywhere, even at a place like Kentucky, unless you set it up where he's like the coach in waiting. But to me, there'd be no reason to do that if you're Kentucky at this point. Speaking of Kentucky, and I will touch on this, Travis asked in the chat, what team has the best guard play in the country? Could it be Kentucky? Well, let's talk about Kentucky. If you're just basing off of last night, you wouldn't probably say Kentucky because they uncharacteristically turned it over 15 times, which was surprising. Now, you can look at it one of two ways. I'm not as worried about it as a Kentucky fan because I would say I didn't track it when I watched the film, but 6 or 7 of them were literally guys just like losing the ball while dribbling it. Like they just would lose it. I even tweeted out at one point, like, I feel like the ball must be slick or something because guys were airballing shots. Kentucky's just literally dribbling it and then missing it, and it goes to the other team. So, I don't think we've all of a sudden forgotten to dribble. But, yeah, when you have DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, Antonio Reeves, it's hard to argue I think Kentucky certainly has the highest ceiling of guard play because you have, first of all, you have four of them. A lot of places don't have four guards the caliber of Kentucky, and then all of those guys, well, three of those four guys are elite shooters. Three of those four are elite passers. So, yeah, it's hard to argue that Kentucky doesn't have the best guard play in college basketball. Kentucky does snap their three-game Rupp Arena losing streak for the first time ever last night with a 75-63 win over Ole Miss. Defense looked a lot better. Again, offense was a little shaky, but I don't put too much stock into that. We know the offense is elite, but it was good to see some defensive baby steps from them. Eddie follows up to his Chris Holtman comment saying Holtman could run practices, do the game plans while Cal's at home hugging his dogs. Yeah, that would that that would maybe be the life for Coach Calipari. Watch the Waltons or whatever he likes to what he likes to do. But yeah, I don't really foresee that happening. Looking ahead to tonight's slate, the big one that we're all going to have circled is Auburn versus South Carolina. A lot of SEC implications in this one, as South Carolina sits on at the top of the standings along with Alabama at 9-2. Auburn is currently a game back at 8-3. The spread in this one, I think, is going to get a lot of people intrigued. Auburn is minus 11.5. Now, some thoughts on that. There are few teams in the country, honestly, equipped in a way to blow people out in the way that Auburn is because they're elite defensively, but they have serious firepower offensively. Like that, they can put up points in a hurry and they can really hold you down. I mean, we even saw it to some extent against Alabama, who's really, really good. Auburn can turn on the Jets and really dominate people. So there's a world where they could win tonight by 24 points going away. Now, also, I wouldn't want to be in a situation at this point where you're betting against South Carolina because I feel like even those of us who I bought into South Carolina before the season, I'm not going to try to take credit for having this level it wasn't even close, but I did say they were going to be pretty good. And I did say they would not be at the bottom of the SEC. I didn't think they were going to be at the top, but also knew they weren't going to be at the bottom. Their guard play was going to be too good. And then you got Colin Murray Boyles, the freshman who's been outstanding as well in the front court. But that front court is, to me, what the issue is going to be tonight. Johnny Broome, Jalen Williams, Dylan Caldwell, all those guys, like those are big, strong. At least Williams and Broome are very skilled as well. Does South Carolina have the horses to match up inside? BJ Mack, undersized. Colin Murray Boyles, undersized. I don't know if they can keep up on the interior. Now, every time that we think that South Carolina is going to take a step back, or every time we think, okay, here they're going to come back down to earth a little bit, Coach Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks just win the darn game. That's what they did against Tennessee a week or so ago. That's what they've done in a lot of these games. That's how they get to 9-2 in the SEC is they just keep stacking wins. Now, I'll be really, really surprised if they go into Auburn, which is just a crazy place to play at this point. That atmosphere is incredible. You're really surprised, but 11.5 is so many points. I just would want to stay away from this one because almost no matter what, I feel like I'd end up feeling stupid. Like if I bet on South Carolina and Auburn blew them out, I would feel a little dumb. If I take Auburn and South Carolina covers, then I'm like, well, like they keep doing it. Like, why did I not know they were going to cover? So I just want to stay away from that one. I also think the pace of play is going to be a really interesting key here. I was looking at it earlier, just the contrast of style of play. On the offensive side of the ball, Auburn per KenPom is 43rd in average possession length offensively, while South Carolina is 349th. So we obviously have contrasting styles. Being at home, does that mean Auburn controls the style? Well, we'll see. I think Auburn has the firepower and the guard play with Aiden Holloway and all those guys to certainly do it if they want. But the strength, physicality of this Gamecocks team, I mean, it took Kentucky out of the game. So can they do it to Auburn? I don't know. It'll be a really fun game to watch tonight, regardless. Also on the docket tonight, 2 top 10 teams going on the road to play unranked opponents. After Syracuse took down UNC last night, um, updating the stat that I had a few weeks ago. At the time, top 10 teams were 17 and 27. Now they're 34 and 35 at unranked opponents. So they're starting to catch up. They're getting close to 500. Tonight could be the night they go over 500. The two such matchups this evening: Tennessee at Arkansas. I believe Tennessee's an 8.5 point favorite in that one. And then UConn at DePaul. I think the Huskies are a 24.5 point favorite there. Obviously, DePaul is one of the worst power conference teams in all of college basketball. I mean, it'll be the most shocking thing of the season if DePaul wins. Now, could Arkansas beat Tennessee at Bud Walton Arena? Yes, it could happen. Arkansas is coming off of a win at Bud Walton against Georgia. They've won two of their last three. It's gotten a little better. That place probably will still be a pretty raucous crowd today for this big one, but we will see how that goes. Could top 10 teams get over 500 against unranked opponents this evening? Travis asks, in a battle of who may end up being the worst team against the spread in the country, we have IUPUI, who is third worst against the spread, against Detroit, who is sixth worst. This is a game that all bettors should stay away from, but who are you taking if you had to bet? Travis, who I'm personal friends with, knows there's no words that I hate more than if you had to bet. But yes, you're right. I don't think I said it to you. I said it in another group chat, but I told somebody that I'd rather walk down 8 Mile than bet this game. But Detroit 0-26. I'd be interested to know, has there ever been a winless team be 5.5 point favorites in a game this late in the season? That seems weird. I mean, my gut says probably to take Detroit Mercy. Honestly, I think IUPUI's kind of checked out a little bit recently. They have struggled. They've lost six straight. Well, I mean, they've struggled all season, but they've lost six straight. A few of those have not been very close. I mean, the last three they've lost by 23, 20, and 27 points. Detroit probably has this one circled of, like, if we're going to win a game, we need to win this one. So in some respects, kind of like their Super Bowl almost. Like, I think if you can motivate your players for any game when you're 0-26, you can motivate them for this one. But we've already spent way too much time talking about Detroit versus IUPUI tonight. Two games I have circled. I haven't had enough time yet to lock in any bets or any picks for this evening, but two games that I am most intrigued in looking at them right now. The under 146.5 in Seton Hall and Xavier is intriguing to me. Seton Hall just has a way of making games a rock fight. Xavier is actually pretty darn good defensively as well. I believe they're 27th in adjusted defensive efficiency per KenPom. So I could see this one being like first to 70 wins, like a 73, 67, something like that. Also, like Arizona State minus 6.5 against the Beavers of Oregon State. Oregon State stinks. Honestly, I've thought that all season. Mostly been right about that all season. They've lost four straight. Arizona State had lost five straight and 7 of 8, but came back and won on the road at Utah, which is weird. So Arizona State team is just hard to figure out. Like, they were really bad to start. Then they start Pac-12 play 4-0. Now here they are at 6-7. But I think they can kind of take care of business and probably whip up on an Oregon State team that just isn't very good at this point in the season. Anyway, I think that is it. That's all I had on the docket for today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. I appreciate everybody who tuned in live. Thanks to those in the comments who asked questions. That's why we do these episodes. If you are watching this in the future, please just leave a comment, like the video, share it with your friends. You can hit me up on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, and I'll answer any questions that you would have asked in the live chat. You can ask them there on Twitter. But also, obviously, the housekeeping as we wrap up here. Subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. It's where you are right now for these all fired up episodes every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast feed on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes. Those come out every Monday and Friday. And then also, as always, follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this evening of college basketball. That Auburn South Carolina game is going to be a good one. and we will talk again on Friday on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. Thanks for listening.